for less than 6 cents an ad, you can be in, really good spots on TV. For 2 or 3 cents, you're showing up on a web browser, equivalent to where a big brand is showing up as well. I want to put the ad in front of who your ideal customer is.
Hey, welcome to the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast, where we simplify the complex world of small business marketing and help you find the tools, the tactics, and the knowledge you need to grow. My name is Ian Cantle from Dental Marketing Heroes, and I'm joined here each week by our incredible marketing guides, Ken Tucker from Changescape Web and Paul Barthel from the same place at different locations now. They're taking over the whole continent, and Jeff Steck from Tylerica Systems, and together we bring decades of hands-on marketing experience to help you turn your small business ambitions into measurable results. And today I'm super excited. We're diving into a topic that you may have heard of, you might not have, because it's pretty specific. This is kind of a level 2.0 type strategy that a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, may not be aware of. But if you think high-tech digital ads are only for big players with massive budgets, think again. Our guest, Dan Kraus, Managing Director of Shift Advertising, who we all have known for years, and he has renewed who he is many times in the industry, and now he's deep into programmatic advertising. He's going to share his insights as they specifically apply to small businesses. So welcome, Dan. Great to have you on the podcast this week.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with y'all.
Yeah. So let's get ready. Let's jump in. I'm going to start with the first question to warm me up a little bit, Dan. Sure. It's a slow pitch lob ball here for you, but let's start off with the basics. What is programmatic advertising?
So, I think about programmatic advertising as, well, I talk about it as targeted direct, because I think programmatic implies that it's all computer driven and then human beings aren't involved in the process. If you think about traditional digital ads, right? When I say traditional, people think about like Google or Facebook or LinkedIn as the digital advertising that they're doing. With those platforms, you're buying ads based off of what they know about you. So what you've told Meta about you, what you've told LinkedIn about you, what Google knows about you from what you're doing with search or where you've been going in a Chrome browser. And so they serve ads to you based off of that. With programmatic, what we're doing is we're building an audience first and then serving ads based on the audience that we've built specifically. And there's a lot of different ways we can build an audience. We'll get into that a little bit. All of this stuff uses the same tools to deliver the ads. So there's all of this technology going on in the background that delivers the ad to, whatever device it is that you're getting it on. Where programmatic or targeted direct is fundamentally different is the way that we build the audience compared to what you would think of as traditional advertising, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're doing very specific activities in order to target the audience in a unique way that can't be done through the regular platforms. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, if you stop and think about it, right, if I want to advertise to somebody via Google search, they've got to be searching for something. But if you have a product or services that somebody isn't necessarily searching for, search doesn't really work, right? If the person that you're trying to reach isn't spending a lot of time hanging out on Facebook or Instagram, or it's not a good fit contextually for the product that you're selling, it's kind of awkward, right, from doing that. So it's really thinking about, okay, who's my ideal customer profile? Where are they hanging out? How do I identify them, build an audience, and then reach them based on the types of things that they're doing? I'm still reaching them digitally. I'm just not doing it within what I would call the walled gardens of Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, right, where they control the narrative much more.
Cool. And can you maybe, I know we're going to dig deeper into this during the discussion, but can you give, just to whet people's appetite a little bit, can you give an example of what this targeted or programmatic form of advertising, like what specifically you could do? Like, do you have a couple examples that you can just throw out there?
Sure. I mean, there's a ton of different use cases. So we just got done geofencing an outdoor trade show for somebody. So one of the companies I work with builds campers for people on top of the back of their pickup trucks. There's about 12 outdoor shows, outdoor expos for people who do kind of outback or off-road camping. And so we actually were able to geofence, draw lines around an area electronically, and then capture the people that were at that show digitally. And now we're able to advertise to them. So for all the people who are in that industry that want to reach that audience after the trade show, well, we now have an audience that we can then advertise to because we know those people are relevant. They were at a trade show about off-road camping, right? So that gives you an idea of how you start to build an audience that's very specific for what you need based on where they are or what they're doing.
That's pretty cool. So you can basically say you wanted to target every Taylor Swift fan that is in the stadium during one of her concerts, if that's what it's called. She has some good music. You can do that. That's what you're saying. Or you could target all the competitive pizza places in your town. And if you're another pizza place, you could advertise to the people that have been in other pizza places.
Absolutely. Both great examples.
So cool. So cool.
Yeah. So Dan, that kind of makes me think, I've heard a lot of media companies talk to people about doing geo-targeting. Oh, everybody who goes to this baseball game, we can geo-target and run ads to. That's not a very good use case, in my opinion, because unless you're just selling very mass products, like toilet paper or something like that, for most businesses, they need to have a much more refined geo-targeting based on an event that is highly relevant to what they're going to buy, like you just talked about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's take an example of a local trade. Like think about a roofer, right? Maybe a roofer is going to be exhibiting at a home show that's going on in the area. So everybody who's at the home show might be a fit for them, or maybe they're doing some kind of outdoor demonstration of really cool equipment that they've got. I happen to know a roofer who does this, so I'm using it as an example, right? So you could actually geofence the area that the roofer is outdoors with his really cool equipment and just pick up all the people that are in that area to then target. So while there might be 10,000 people that go through the home show, there might only be 500 that stop and look at their really cool equipment. So we'll pick up the audience of the 500, not the 10,000.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
But yeah, I mean, what you're saying, Ken, as far as, that's what I love about using these tools is that you can get really specific for really unique businesses. That's what I think a lot of people struggle with is the waste of advertising or the waste of marketing, right? I'm spending money and it's not hitting the people that I really want it to hit. This allows us to reduce that waste a great deal, right? So I probably wouldn't geofence a baseball game. I might geofence a Taylor Swift concert, depending on what I'm trying to promote.
Right. Yeah. Is there an audience that's too small?
There's not an audience that's too small, but what ends up happening is event audiences tend to degrade over 60 days. So if you start with a small audience, it disappears pretty quickly. Right. So, I did one recently for somebody that wanted to get a bunch of people who work on custom cars. And our initial audience was about 75 people is what we ended up gathering. That audience became pretty useless after about 3 weeks because it cut in half over the course of 3 weeks. And trying to serve ads to 30 people, you kind of annoy them because you serve too many ads too fast.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can get 1,000 people, then you end up with an audience that doesn't disappear too quickly.
How granular can you get? Can you, like, if somebody goes down a particular section of a Home Depot, for like plumbing supplies, can you get down to that specific geo-targeting?
I can get to an area that's 20 feet by 20 feet. Wow. The problem is figuring out where that 20 feet by 20 feet is on the other side of a roof. Right. So, I've had people said, well, I want to geofence a competitor's booth at a trade show. Well, if you're going to the trade show and you want to drop a pin at either corner of their booth so I can get the latitude, longitude lines of where their booth is, I absolutely can do that. And I actually have done that.
Yeah.
But if you're hoping that I'm going to pick the right spot by looking at a bird's eye view through a roof to try and figure out where it is in a convention center, probably not going to get it too accurate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you can get really tight. It's just a matter of, can you identify the actual area that you want to get into?
You also have to think if, this is an example that has come up before, geofencing a specific department in a store. What about all the people passing through? They have no intention of buying plumbing supplies. They're just passing through. So then you start advertising to them. So yeah, you got to think about it, right? You got to think and what's the strategy and which one works, which one matches up with the audience you want to reach.
Yeah, and there are lots of unintended consequences, right? The way the audience is, for a lot of the geofencing, the way the audience is built is off of somebody's cell phone, right? So I have to be walking around with a cell phone that has location services on, and I have to have an app running in the background somewhere that's actually ad supported. So as long as those two criteria are met, it tends to get picked up. But what ends up happening, as Jeff just said, you've got these unintended consequences. So, if you think about some of the convention centers, and I think there's one the one that definitely comes to mind for me is the Ernest Morrill Center in New Orleans, right? If you look at that building, it looks like one long convention center, but there's a highway that goes through the middle of it. Between halls, I think B and C or D and E, there's a highway that actually goes through that building. So when you geofence it, you do not want to include the highway in that geofence because you get everybody who's going through the building at that point.
Yeah. Well, the same thing would be true.
There's a lot of unintended consequences if you're not paying attention to what you're doing.
Yeah. Same thing would be true if there are multiple stories.
Mm-hmm.
Building.
Yeah. It works on latitude and longitude, not altitude.
Yeah.
So this doesn't work particularly well in places like New York or LA or actually New York and Dallas and Houston are my three biggest problems because there's a lot of tall buildings with offices in them. Right. Toronto can be a problem depending on which part it is. But it worked. That's why I said latitude, longitude, fine. But if the room that you're trying to geofence is underneath 42 floors of hotel rooms, you're going to get the 42 floors of hotel rooms as well. So it doesn't work so well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me pull you back up to a higher level question. Sure. This is all cool stuff. So it is cool stuff. I mean, it's a great tactic, a great opportunity for businesses to use if it makes sense to them. Why don't more people know about it and use it?
Personal opinion, not based on any research. I think most small businesses think about their marketing and their advertising in particular about the way that they do things as consumers, right? And so we use Google, so we think about Google ads. We use Meta, we use Instagram, we use Facebook. We use LinkedIn. We think about those. Business owners, people see ads on the mobile apps on their phone, but they don't really know how they got there. Or they see ads on a web browser as they're looking around the web and they don't really know how they got there. Or they see it they see something that's really relevant to them on a TV channel while they're watching something streaming, but they don't know how it got there and they don't know who to ask. So if I don't know who to ask and I got a million other things going on and trying to run my business, I'm probably not going to pursue it. So I think it's more a matter of I don't know how to do it than I don't want to do it, is where I think a lot of it comes from. My back in the days when the phones were attached to the wall and I had my first job out of college, the first thing I was doing was actually selling advertising, local insertions on like CNN and MTV and USA Network when the cable stations, cable TV first let you do local insertions. And it felt very familiar to me doing programmatic because it feels a lot like what that looked like almost 40 years ago because people didn't know you could do it. So all of a sudden, businesses the local pizza place found out, hey, I can do advertising on TV just to these two towns that I serve. And when they found out they could do it, they were really excited to, but they didn't know they could do it until somebody evangelized it to them. So I feel like I'm spending a lot of my time evangelizing the fact that you can do this stuff today.
Yeah.
That's what one of the points of having you on, right? Is it's something that we want to educate people about. It's a great arrow in the quiver.
Yeah, and I mean, for big brands, it works really well because they can just throw a whole bunch of money, buy a bunch of rating points, and it helps spread out and allows them to fill in the cracks in their media plans. But for small businesses, they're not buying media that way, right? They're thinking about how do I how do I increase my brand awareness to the people who actually matter, right? That's what I care about. And so this allows us to get targeted that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I know there's other considerations and misconceptions that are going to come up later, so I'll hold comments till then. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons, and I think by the end of this podcast, we're going to have broken through most, if not all of them. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah. So Dan, can you talk about where do these ads actually show up, and can a small business show up on? I mean, I assume they're going to show up on websites. You mentioned mobile apps. Are they going to show up on the same types of sites and apps that big brands show up on?
Yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing about this, so the ads themselves will show up in an ad-supported app. So think about games or weather apps or maps, et cetera, that are on your phone or your tablet. It shows up as you're browsing the web. If you're going to your local TV station website and then you're watching, a news story that came on last night, you're probably going to watch an ad before you do that. Those are pre-roll ads. They show up there. And they can also show up, you can do streaming TV. So OTT or CTV is what it's called, and be there. And you have the ability to compete really effectively with big brands for all of those placements based on what you want to spend. Right. So, we can get to specific budgets, but, for less than 6 cents an ad, you can be in, really good spots on TV. For 2 or 3 cents, you're showing up on a web browser, equivalent to where a big brand is showing up as well. Because a lot of times they're focused on how is the computer bidding their budget and getting them the most number of eyeballs or the most number of impressions. When we take it and we adapt this technology and use it for smaller businesses, if we're really focused on getting who our audience is, we can bid higher because we're looking for this exact audience. We know we've got the exact audience we want. So we're able to spend the money better. And you're actually more effective at actually putting your message in front of the people you're trying to reach that way.
Yeah. So are these banner ads, or can you do video ads, or both?
You can do video, you can do banner, you can do GIF, and you can do TV. So the TVs run as 10, 15s, 20s, or 30-second spots.
Okay.
You can do full minute spots, but I almost never advise a small business to do it because a full minute is a lot of time to fill in an ad.
Yeah.
So most people don't have that storytelling ability.
And most people don't have that attention span.
There's that also, yeah.
So Jeff, hey, how you doing anyway?
I'm fine.
Just, I didn't chime in at the beginning, but anyway, so I think you kind of touched on this a little bit already, Dan. Would you use programmatic ads instead of Google or Facebook, or in addition to? And I think you kind of touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an and, not an or, right? Programmatic gives me a way to really effectively target who I want to get in a couple of different ways that you don't have available to you in a Facebook or a Google or an Instagram. But it works really well in conjunction. So if I'm going to put a LinkedIn retargeting pixel on my website or a Facebook retargeting pixel on my website, I can build that audience using programmatic and then advertise to those people on Meta, on LinkedIn, using retargeting at generally a lower cost than when I'm trying to build the audience from scratch on those platforms. So they work well together. I mean, this is advertising, it's not direct response. And I draw that distinction for people a lot, right? It's excuse me. We're going to get people's attention. We'll get people to a website. But if you're coming off your mobile phone and you're clicking on an ad and you're seeing something on a site, you're probably not filling out a form on your mobile phone, right? And most people don't want to fill out forms anyway. So that just makes it tough. But if I'm putting you into a place where I can retarget, and now I could actually capture you through a Facebook form because I've retargeted you, that's an easier conversion. Or trying to get somebody through a LinkedIn form, that's an easier conversion. So these two pieces work together really well. I hope that makes sense from that standpoint.
Is there a click to call capability?
There actually is. So you can, the same way that we can set up an ad as a GIF, we can set it up as a click to call. And it's just a piece of code running at the background of it. So as long as you click on it, it's going to go and dial out. And again, because these are getting served on mobile, that works. with some of these ads, you get accidental clicks. So you got to think about how do you want to sort through the accidental phone numbers that are coming in, right? But it will still be a way to go and track that.
Cool.
So what do you think about, because we actually we work with an agency that has a client that does this, and they do some of this like on the streaming side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're using QR codes. And
so when you're talking about that,
to have gotten big lately. I mean,
mm-hmm.
I have never scanned a QR code off a TV.
You don't understand it?
I think he said he's never scanned one.
So one of my favorite words in the English language is solipsism, which is thinking that everybody does things the way that you do it, is my own paraphrase version of it. And there are plenty of people that actually will scan a QR code off of an ad now.
And the reason I ask is because on one of them, and it may just, I don't know exactly how they're doing it. They have someone else doing it for them, but we set up the QR codes so that we can track them for them. And on one media outlet, they get like practically nothing. And on the other one, they actually get pretty good results.
Okay. Yeah. And the question is, where is it streaming, right? So you can actually, when you're doing CTV or OTT, streaming TV, you can choose inventory, or you can kind of do run a station, quote unquote, like what would be a run a station, which is based off of bidding. It all depends on how much budget you want to do. Like if you said, hey, I want to be on, these 5 shows that are streaming on the Golf Channel, you can do that. You will pay a premium for choosing the shows that you want to be on. But the reality is if you think about what we were talking about, if you're choosing your audience, you don't really need to choose the show. So, think about the fact that, do I want a billboard on the side of the highway, or do I want a billboard in the car? Because if you've chosen your audience right, the billboard's riding in the car with the audience. So when I go to watch something on streaming TV, if I'm part of your audience and you've chosen to advertise on streaming TV, then those ads are going to show up as part of the audience, as opposed to trying to choose the content. Now, if you put a QR code in a TV ad, then that becomes a way for somebody to get a quote unquote click, because there's no way to click on a TV ad. But the QR code becomes a way to actually measure that click. It's a proxy for it. It's not perfect, but it's a proxy.
You just got to make sure that you think through the user experience and what it takes to get that QR code click, right?
Yep.
If you put it up for 2 seconds at the end of the ad, it's gone by the time somebody even has a chance to get their phone out. Things like that drive me crazy. And in fact, there's a great marketer / comedian guy named Scott Stratton. He wrote a book called QR Codes Kill Kittens. And the notion was that if you use a QR code inappropriately, a kitten dies. So don't do it. And he talked about that. He said, sending a QR code in an email, I'm already on my computer. Just give me a link. Right. If the video is being watched on the phone, how am I going to scan it? I can't turn my phone around and take a picture of itself. But on a streaming ad, something that's showing up on Netflix or Hulu or something, it can make sense if you do it appropriately and leave the QR code there long enough for people to actually be able to react to it, get their phone out, get it unlocked. You're probably looking at, on a 10-second ad, half the ad being the QR code then, right?
Well, or you put it in the corner as a bug or something like that, right? So that it's persistent. But it's also thinking about like the media choices, as you're saying, Jeff, right? Because people watch Netflix on their computer, they watch it on a streaming, on a smart TV. They're watching a lot of this content in a lot of different places, and you've got to say, the ads that I'm running that have a QR code in the corner, I only want this particular version to show on a TV type device. I don't want it to show on a computer or a tablet, because that's not a great experience. So it's being very deliberate and thinking it through.
That also illustrates a great example to illustrate the type of granularity you have with where you target these ads, right?
Yep, absolutely. You can say, I only want to show on mobile device, or I only want to show on tablet. Which changes the experience. It also changes, the way you've got to think about messaging. 320 by 50 pixel ad is really small. The next time you're playing a game, look at that banner that flashes across the top or the bottom of the screen on your phone. You don't have a lot of space there, right? You got maybe 5-6 words and an image. Mm-hmm. So you've got to be really good at knowing your ideal customer, and then also what's your ideal message to that customer that you're trying to get them to take action on.
And Dan, you were talking about advertising on streaming platforms. You mentioned Netflix. I mean, Amazon has it now for shows if you're watching it on a smart TV. Can you do programmatic advertising right down to your own local geography on those as well? So you're not potentially competing with the big guys, because there's certainly lots of big companies advertising on those platforms now.
Right. So remember that you're following the audience, Ian. So if your audience is local, the ads are only running to that audience that are local.
Yeah.
So you're able to do that. And you can say, hey, you know what? I wanted geofence, because we can geofence at a lot line level. So in the US, Canada's a little different challenge, but in the US, you can do it at a lot line level because of the way of our zip codes are set up. So I'm able to actually say, I want these 1,000 homes, and I only want to advertise into these 1,000 homes. I could say, hey, you know what? I want to reach all the people who live in Orange County, California, that own a Jeep Gladiator that's less than 3 years old, who make more than $250,000 a year. And I can target them with streaming TV, right? So you can get to that level of specificity if you want to.
Very cool. Very cool.
It's a lot of layers. That's the really cool thing about it, is you have a lot of control over how many layers you use to build your audience, right?
Yes. I've been accused of being a stalker, and it's probably accurate because of the way that you can build an audience, right? So it's kind of
theoretically advertise to one person.
Yeah. You can get really defined. So yes, it's, and that's the cool thing about it is, what are you trying to do? Who are you trying to reach that you haven't been able to get to any other way? I have people that have used this because they've been emailing their customers, and their customers aren't opening their email anymore, right? I've got customers that bought from me 3, 4, 5 years ago. They're not opening my emails anymore. Okay, fine. Let's advertise to them instead of emailing them, because everybody's getting so much email in their box, you can't reach them. Or I bought a mailing list, or somebody gave me a mailing list, and I don't have permission to reach these people, and I don't want to just spam them. Okay, fine. You can turn a mailing list into an advertising list, and I can advertise to somebody as opposed to emailing them. And I'm not breaking any of the rules when I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Because the advertising is anonymous.
So cool. You talked a bit about cost and price related to advertising. Bringing that into the context of small businesses, are there kind of minimum budgets that, just thinking of like, so let's say a roofer, a dentist, and a restaurant walk into a bar, and they want to buy your services. What's kind of the starting point to, and I know every case is unique and every geography is probably unique as well. But is there kind of a starting point where small businesses, if they set aside a certain amount of budget, they can grow from?
Yeah. And so you ask every marketing person what it costs, and the answer is always, it depends, right? So let's start with the stuff that makes it depends, which is, depending, if you're going to shop around for this, you're going to have some people that have setup fees, some people who don't. You're going to have people that charge you for one price for certain kind of media, different prices for others. There's premiums for certain kind of lists. So there's a lot of different things that can get added in. And then you've got creative costs on top of that, right? I've got to have the spots that I'm going to run. I try really hard to simplify this. So my minimum for my clients is a $3,000 spend. That could be $500 a month over 6 months. It can be $1,000 a month over 3. It can be $1,500 a month over 2. I generally recommend to people that you want to go 90 days at least. So you want to do something that's at least 3 months. And my costs when I'm telling somebody a price are all in. So if I tell you that it's $20 for 1,000 ads, that's the price. There's no setup fees. There's no management fees. There's nothing else on top of it, right? I've just tried to bundle it all together to make it easy for people from that standpoint. How much you have to spend has a lot to do with how big of an audience do you want to reach, right? So if you said, hey, I've got $500 a month to spend, I'm going to tell you, you can reach an audience of about 300 people effectively for $500 a month. And when I say effectively, that's, I'm going to put 3 ads in front of everybody in that audience every day for the month for $500, give or take. It's going to be about that, because that's really the kind of exposure you want. You want to hit them at least 3 times. You start to do more than that, you annoy them. You do less than that, it kind of becomes ineffective. So if you said you have $1,000, well, now your audience size doubles, right? Now you got 600 people that you can reach. So it really becomes a matter of how big is the audience you want to try and reach, and over what period of time. What are you trying to accomplish? Am I just trying to keep some brand out there and remind people that I'm there because there's a really long purchase cycle that they're going through? Or am I trying to create awareness of the fact that I have a product or a service that nobody's ever heard of before? Different intents, different reach and frequency that you want to get to. So it's trying to balance it out. But that's kind of my answer around it depends. It does, but there's some numbers to work off of from a starting point.
Yeah, that's super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, how about for top of funnel awareness? So you're talking about reaching very specific audiences or specific numbers. And when I say top of funnel awareness, I think the layering of the targeting still comes into play, but it may not be number of people driven. It's just wherever they are, whatever you can get. Isn't programmatic typically in that context sold as a impressions basis? And it's a numbers game. You can get a lot of impressions, but don't necessarily expect a lot to make it all the way to the bottom of the funnel. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So when you're thinking about, hey, I'm just trying to create a lot of impressions and a lot of awareness, that's a big brand strategy, right? If I'm selling toilet paper, milk, orange juice, take your commodity pick, right? It allows you to create a brand impression across a really broad audience without worrying about the targeting too much at a really cost-effective per impression basis. What I'm trying to do when I work with the agencies and the small businesses that I work with is really trying to take it down a level, which is I want to put the ad in front of who your ideal customer is. Now, am I trying to create top of the funnel awareness because they've never heard of you before? That's a different kind of frequency and message than somebody that I'm trying to get to come to the website so I can put them into a retargeting audience. But I'm usually starting at a level below just awareness, Jeff, right? It's not just pure awareness. It's I want to get you with awareness and start to figure out if there's some level of intent. And can I help move you through that funnel? Mm-hmm. But programmatic is always at the front end of the funnel. It's almost never at the back end.
Yeah. So that's actually a really good segue into my next question. I know you've talked about it a little bit already, but can you maybe give us a few small business, very specific use cases for programmatic?
Sure. I mean, I hit on a couple. I think it's really great for everything from a trade show to a farmer's market, depending on what it is you sell, right? Because I can build an audience and then reach it. I watch a lot of businesses spend a lot of money to go to a trade show, but they don't really go at it with a plan, right? It's, hey, I'm going to buy a booth, I'm going to show up, and I'll see who walks by. Well, you can spend $5,000 to do that between the cost of the space and the banners and the travel and the hotel and all the other stuff. That's generally the minimum in the door. But you can use programmatic to capture everybody who's at that show and keep advertising to them afterwards. So it allows you to get more leverage, or you could use programmatic to capture a show that you're not going to go to at all, right? So it gives you a way to reach that audience even though you weren't there. I mentioned using it with an email list so that you try and get a better email open rate. So we have a client that was getting about a 2% click-through rate off of their emails. Then we started advertising to their list, and after 4 months of advertising, their click-through rate from their email list went up to 7%, right? So we're advertising about the subject line so that when the subject line hits their inbox, hits the prospect's inbox, they recognize it. It's not something that's totally foreign. So it increases the click-through. The same thing works for snail mail too, right? You're going to go drop a direct mail piece at, $1 a piece or more. Well, why don't you advertise to the homes before you actually mail it? And then when it hits the mailbox, it's not completely cold. So those are ways to improve that. We can target people based off of what they like, how much they make, where they live, whether they have a mortgage, how long they've been in their house, right? So you think about trades. Hey, I'm an HVAC guy and I'm looking for ways to reach people who probably are going to need a new HVAC unit. Okay, fine. Let's go target homeowners who've been in their house for 10 to 15 years, right? They may be looking for a new unit soon, right? So there's different ways that you can do that kind of targeting. We started using it to promote some of our content, because if I got to pay to boost a post on LinkedIn or pay to boost a post on Meta, I might as well just advertise directly and try and get people to my website to see my content directly. And that works pretty well. One of the more unusual use cases that I don't think people really think about is to use it for recruitment, right? If you're in the trades and you're trying to hire an auto mechanic or, pink collar, gray collar, blue collar, those folks that you're trying to hire aren't on LinkedIn generally. They're not easy to find, right? So you're hoping that you put an ad out on Indeed. You're hoping you put in, a listing somewhere and that people wander by it. But that means you're only talking to the people who are actually looking. But if you put an ad in front of somebody who's not looking, you might make them aware of a job opportunity. So, advertising to the employee parking lot of a hospital if you're looking for nurses. Geofencing the service bays of an auto dealership if you're looking for mechanics. So there's lots of different ways that you can use this to get your message, whatever it might be, in front of the right people. So I could talk about use cases for a long time. I'll just stop there. There's lots.
And Dan, can you do, so your example of the service bay at a dealership, can you do something like dwell time? Like if somebody's in there multiple times through a day or a week, or spends a work day in there, can you say, can you target that way as well? So you're not getting customers, you're getting the people that actually work there.
Yeah, so you can do day parting, and you can also do frequency. So if I wanted to target somebody who is there frequently versus infrequently, that's a good way to get employee versus customer, or customer versus employee. It's always cleaner if you can find an area that's more specific to an employee versus customer. So I was talking to somebody who is opening a fast food franchise, and they're like, hey, can I go and recruit from McDonald's or some of the other places because I'm going to have a better work environment? And the answer is yeah, but I'm only going to geofence the back half of the McDonald's.
The lunchroom.
The front half, right? I'm only going to get the place where the employees are. So you can get that specific, so that helps, and that allows you to eliminate some of the waste. You'll still get some, but you're going to get very little of it.
So speaking of restaurants, let's say I'm a Mexican restaurant owner. Can I geofence multiple Mexican restaurants in a 3-mile, 5-mile radius, whatever makes sense geographically, population density and whatnot, to find the customers of my competitors so that I can run ads to them to get them to come and try my Mexican restaurant?
Absolutely. That's an easy use case. Yeah. Right. And hey, I'm opening up a coffee shop that's not a Starbucks, it's not a Dunkin' Donuts, it's not a Tim Hortons, right? Fine, go geofence all 3 of those, and then advertise your coffee shop with a coupon or a QR code attached to it for them to bring in, right?
Yeah. Can you go back in time? So is it, like can you go back to the last 12, customers for the last 12 months, or does it be kind of a running building list?
I can go back in time, but you can't go very far back and have it be effective. Okay. So I can go back in time, usually about 6 to 8 weeks. What happens is all of the do not track rules that are out there, and all the people who say don't track me, they have an advertising, I'm going to call it an ID. It's kind of like a cookie. They expire relatively quickly. So, if I go and try and build an audience from someplace that they were at a year ago, I'm going to get very few people. But if I go back 6 weeks, it's still a pretty good sized group. I'm still going to get 60 to 80% of what was there. Yeah.
There are so many use cases. Yeah. There are so many use cases like that. You could be an auto mechanic, like you talked about, and target other, oil change places, the list goes on and on. It's really a fascinating and seriously underutilized technology.
Yeah. So like right before we got on this call, I got a phone call from the car dealership that I bought my car from. They're like, hey, I just wanted you to know that we're running a special for oil changes and tires right now. Okay, well, I happened to answer the phone because I knew the number that was coming up. But if I didn't, how else would they get the message to me? Well, they could actually, they know where I live, right? I bought the car from them. They can geofence me and actually advertise that special to me, right? But they're not doing that. So it's just another way to get it in front of somebody. So yeah, there's a lot. There's so many different ways you can use this stuff. You let your imagination start to run wild.
Yeah. So what kind of reporting do you get, and what are the best ways to track the results? And you mentioned, the of using this in conjunction with other advertising platforms. So how do you close the loop and actually build an advertising loop, if you will, between, the kind of the top of the funnel to the bottom, so use programmatic to get to the point where people have the intent and they're making the purchase?
So it all depends on how specific you want to build your funnel, right? Because we all suffer from this last click attribution problem, right? Because if I send you to the website with programmatic and then you get put into a retargeting audience, but then you come back through a Google search because you recognize the brand, it's going to look like it came from Google, right? Yeah. So we all have this problem. Every company has this problem from a last click attribution. And so that's not the best way to do it in any way, shape, or form. We can use UTM codes so that we're able to have this flow through and show up in Google Analytics or any of the reporting tools that you use that show UTMs. So that'll show you traffic. If you're talking about a physical location, so let's go back to your Mexican restaurant example, I can actually create what's a conversion zone. So I turn my restaurant into a conversion zone. I'm going to serve ads to all the people that were in all of the competing restaurants. When they walk into my restaurant with a device that I've served an ad to, I can actually see that ad converted them to walking in the door for me, right? It's not perfect, but it's a decent proxy because maybe they saw the ad on a TV, maybe they saw the ad on a mobile, on a web browser, but then they walked in with a phone that they didn't see the ad on. So it doesn't always work, but it at least gives me a proxy to get an idea of what isn't working. I can do the same thing virtually on a website. So I put a pixel on a website. You saw the ad, but then you came to my website without clicking on the ad. I'm going to be able to draw that connection. We call it an action or a view through. So we're able to draw that connection. So there's a lot of different ways that you can track that this is working and that you're seeing results from it. But ultimately, the problem is still one of everybody wants to do last click attribution, and it just doesn't work in our AI-driven, multi-channel, zigzag customer journey world, right? And you guys have talked about this plenty, right? The number of touches that people make or get before they actually get somewhere is just huge, and it's really hard to know what influenced that actual purchase at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talk about, certain industries have many more touch points that are required typically than others. Right. If you're an emergency plumber, I don't know if programmatic's going to necessarily work all that well for you, right?
I would never talk to somebody about it who's an emergency plumber, right? Because it's something I need right now.
Right, exactly. But if you're a car dealership, like you said, the average statistic, I think, is 42 touch points before somebody's actually making a purchase of a car because it's a very big ticket item.
Right.
So is there value or anything that we could take away in terms of the number of touch points? Just kind of a rule of thumb, if it's a higher touch point type solution, is that where programmatic really should be strongly considered as part of the mix? Whereas if it's, basically an instant decision because it's an emergency situation, stay away from it.
Yeah, I like to say that it works really well for purchases that are thoughtful, right? So I've got to be considering my options. Maybe I'm doing a little bit of research. I'm trying to do some comparison. When there's thoughtfulness involved, programmatic can help move that needle because it gives you different ways to expose people to the fact that you're out there as they're going through the buying process, right? It's not you berating them with phone calls or emails or all the other traditional ways that we think about selling, whether it's B2B or B2C. It just becomes another vehicle to keep your brand in their mind as they're working through their thoughtfulness.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Hey, Dan, one quick question that occurred to me when you were talking about kind of top of the funnel and nurturing, right? John Loomer, who I don't know if you sat in on his session, this was years ago through Duct Tape Marketing, but what I found so fascinating with his strategy was he does meta advertising, so Facebook, Instagram, and what he would do is he would create this this form of a nurturing funnel whereby if people come in and they take an action at one level, you actually adjust the strategy for targeting that person with a new form or a deeper form of advertising. Is that too complex for something like what we're talking about, or can that be done on this form of advertising as well?
I could do it in a couple of different levels. I think it gets hard to do it more than two, maybe three, right? Because you can show one set of ads for the initial audience, another set for a retargeted audience. If you come back again to a different page, you could probably set up one other one. But pretty quickly, you're going to get the cookies confused as to what ad should be served where in this particular piece. That's why I think about it more as, hey, this is the top of the funnel. Meta picks it up from there and runs it for a while. Somebody else is going to pick it up from there and run it for a while, because each of the different platforms kind of have their own best use as you start to break down the customer journey.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm a big proponent of multi-touch marketing across multiple platforms, right? It's not just one way.
Yeah.
So we've pretty much answered the question I was going to ask, which is how small an area can you geofence? And it works on latitude and longitude. So I'm going to ask you, if a small business come to you and they say, okay, I want to do this, but I don't really have an audience. How would you go about initially building that audience?
My first question is, who's your ideal customer, right? Who do you want to have? Because if we know that, then we can start to work it backwards and figure out, where do they gather, or where are they? And I'll give you one example. So this is a customer I work with that they do super high-end jigsaw puzzles. And when I say high-end jigsaw puzzles, we're talking about like jigsaw puzzles that are $600, custom wooden jigsaw puzzles.
They take 7 years to finish, though, I'm sure. So you amortize the price.
Yeah. The way that they had been marketing their products is going out to really high-end inns, the places that are like $2,000 a night for a room. And they'd have their puzzles in their common rooms, and they do puzzle events there for people who are staying at the inn, which is great if you were there and somebody happened to notice it. So one of the things that we've worked with them on is geofencing those inns. So now we can actually build an audience of all the people that stay at the inns that have their puzzles at them, and then be able to continue putting that brand in front of people. So they didn't have an audience necessarily, but they had a place where an audience was passing through what they did. So does that help, Paul?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes you have to take a couple of step backs and really think about what's the customer journey and where can you get them along that journey. But there's very few places that there's very few types of businesses where you're not going to be able to figure out how you can isolate those people somewhere.
And I actually did have a follow-up question about geofencing. We've talked about taking it down to a very fine granularity, even an individual house. Is there a practical limit as to how many geofence targets you can have running on an ad? If you take it down to the house and you're targeting a large population in a city, your number of ideal clients that you might want to make could be in the thousands, right? Can you geofence 1,000 individual houses?
Yeah, actually, you can geofence 1,000 individual houses. It's a little bit harder to geofence a really large geographic area. So houses are actually easy because, well, in the US, houses are easy, and I'm going to draw the distinction because lot lines are really easy to try and define. And then most houses only have 3 or 4 people in them that have devices. Right. So your effective audience isn't that big, right? 1,000 homes turns into 5,000 devices. If you take a large geographic area, that can be an awful lot. Or to go back to our very first example, right? I'm going to go and geofence SoFi Stadium while Taylor Swift is playing, and I'm going to pick up 100,000 people, right? So the practical level is, what can you afford and where is the audience that's really relevant for you? I think, Jeff, right?
I was specifically thinking of your example of the car dealer wanting to geofence their customers for oil changes, right?
Right.
If a car dealer's got 1,000 customers in an ad campaign, can you geofence 1,000 different locations?
Yeah, as long as I've got the addresses, I can upload them and geofence them pretty easily. So this is why I say
you don't need to go figure out the lot lines for everything. You just punch in addresses and it'll do it.
Yeah, In the US, I just punch in the addresses. This is why Canada is a different challenge, because in Canada, I actually have to go draw them all individually. I have a whole different approach for that. So the Canadians don't let you do things quite as easily. You're trying to avoid advertising up there.
We've noticed. Believe me, we've noticed.
But they do apologize for
it. Right.
Jeez Louise. Hey,
so,
this is probably a pretty straightforward answer, or maybe it's not. I'll be curious to hear what you say, Dan. But how long does it take to set up a campaign?
If you have creative, 72 hours. If you don't have creative, however long it takes to get the creative done. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we prefer to have somebody come to us with creative. If they don't, we will do it, but it's not our preference. Because I think if you're working with an agency or you've got an internal marketing director, those are people that understand your messaging and, the imagery and everything you're trying to do really well. And they're the best people to actually do the ads. We'll work with them on the size and the provide feedback. But if the creative is there, we can get an ad up and running in, 72 hours. If you're saying, so that's actually get an ad running. If you said, hey, you know what, there's a trade show going on and it starts in like 3 hours and I don't have any ads ready, what can I do? I can actually build a fence and kick it off immediately. Like there's no lead time needed to build the fence and start to build an audience. It's the time to get the ads up and running on the backside. That usually takes a little bit.
Presumably there's some approval level on that too.
What's that?
Is there some approval level on the ad creatives that it's got to go through?
There's usually about a 24-hour approval period that goes through because all the ad platforms want to make sure that it complies with all of their everything from anti-porn to anti-illegal activities to everything else, and that the ads are going to a website that's legitimate and tied to the advertiser, et cetera. Right. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there's a few things you cannot advertise, but not many at this point.
I'll also say relative to the creatives, if your goal is to advertise on the TV side, and I can say this from experience, it's pretty restrictive in terms of what you need, technically speaking, on the video. I did one campaign for a client once. We went probably through 3 or 4 iterations of trying to get a video that was acceptable to them. Because there's different requirements for advertising on Hulu, for instance, than posting a YouTube video on YouTube.
Right.
So it's not just like take it on your phone and upload it. There's a little more to it. So yeah, plan that in on the.
Yeah, there are resolution specs, and it can't be 29.59 seconds, right? It needs to be 30 seconds.
Got to be exact, yeah.
Yeah,
the encoders or codecs, whatever they call it, come into play. Yeah,
yeah. Because if it's too short or too long, it doesn't run. Period. So you got to meet the standards. So it's not quite as loose as YouTube is. No, in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But still, for what you can get out of it, it's very doable, and the results can be pretty amazing especially for the cost involved.
Right. And I think if you've got a really good story to tell, TV is a really great way to do it, whether you're B2B or B2C. It's just thinking about what's the story, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a talking head. It doesn't have to be visuals that aren't, that are real versus, animated. There's a lot of different ways that you can do and tell your story. It's thinking through who's my ideal customer, why do they care, right? What's the story you're going to tell?
So actually, now I've got another selfish question for you, because I was working with a client once that was targeting very specifically CEOs, chief medical officers, chief nursing officers at regional hospitals. Does your layering of the audience definition criteria allow you to get, if you're in a B2B, to be able to get that information, and then, when they're at home watching, something on Netflix, target an ad to them?
So if I was going after like the chief medical officer for, all the hospitals in, let's say, the tri-borough area in New York, right? Or I'm trying to get New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, I'd probably buy that email list and turn that email list into an advertising set of ideas, right? That's the easiest way to go at that kind of targeting. If I said, hey, I'm trying to reach all the doctors that are in Kansas City, well, that's actually a list I can target based on home ownership and profession. So it depends on how specific you want to get to the title versus, kind of the job role.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you can usually get there. You just might have to go through a couple of steps to get there.
By hook or by crook, you can get there.
Yeah.
So Dan, what's the match rate from uploading an email list to actually having an advertising audience that you can use?
So it's usually about a 48-hour process if I've got a list. There's a couple of vendors out there. The one I work with takes about 48 hours to turn it around. And so if I upload 1,000 email addresses, I'm probably going to get an advertising list that's got about 700 people in it.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing, and this is why it actually works with Castle in Canada. It's why I don't have problems with GDPR in Europe, is that when I upload that list, I don't know which 700 I got back.
Yeah.
I also don't know which 700 I'm serving ads to. So I've removed all of this personally identifiable information out of the process, which means I'm now not in violation of any of the privacy laws because I'm not advertising to a person or personally identifiable information.
I don't know if you're the right person to ask about this or not, since you really don't like to do the creative, but the creative in my mind is essential especially for banner ads. And what I've seen for the ads that I've just witnessed personally as a consumer, the ad designs are horrible.
Yeah.
Can you talk about any best practices in terms of creating effective ads for programmatic advertising?
So there's generally 6 really common sizes on, and I can't rattle them off the top of my head, but there's generally 6 pretty common sizes, and it's thinking about what do you want to do with each size. So some of them actually will loan themselves to putting 8 to 10 words in them. Some of them will not, right? It's taking one image and saying, oh, I'm going to resize it for 6 different sizes of ads doesn't work really well. Yeah. So it's really thinking about it. And then if you can say it with an image as opposed to a word, use the image instead of the word. If you can figure out, if you've got a bunch of words that you need to work with, figure out, can you make it into a GIF where they roll through maybe 3 slides to get, 6 or 8 words across to somebody. We do a lot with GIFs because a little bit of motion captures your eye in an ad environment. So like we just launched a campaign for somebody, and the only motion in the ad is actually a cloud moving away from the sun. But just that little bit of motion is enough to pull somebody's eye over to it on a screen. So it's thinking about the little things, right? You're not going to get everything you want to say across one of these ads, right? So it's what's the brand impression you want to make? What's the action you want them to take? They click on it by accident. What do they see on the other side, right?
Yeah. Do you see colors performing better than others? I was talking to Perry Belcher, and this is for actual landing pages on websites and buttons. So I don't know if the same holds or not, but he's been doing a lot of studying and found that orange and green buttons get people to convert at a much higher level. So is there something in terms of color schemes for banners, or GIFs or whatever that seem to perform better than the others?
When we A/B test stuff, I don't see a huge difference between it, but I'm also doing a lot of stuff in pretty small volumes, Ken. So, it's not like I've got hundreds of thousands of ads to compare against in an existing campaign.
Yeah.
But back to our budget conversation. Most of the people I'm working with are working with relatively small budgets.
Right.
So, 50,000 impressions over the course of, a month or two doesn't load itself to really great A/B testing across a bunch of sizes.
Yeah, true. Okay.
But, we generally run 3 different sets of creative just because we know that one of them is going to perform better. We're just never sure which one.
That's always a mystery. I mean, you can pick the best looking image that you think it's like, oh man, I've used something similar to this in the past and it just blew it out of the water. And you use a very similar or even the same image in another ad campaign and it doesn't perform the way you expect.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, to Dan's point, that's why we do those kind of tests, right? Because we don't know. And if we did know, we wouldn't have to do tests.
Yeah,
exactly. So, and the thing is I keep trying this in industries that, it should work, but sometimes the creative doesn't. So we change the creative and it works well, right? Or it works really well in video. I have a guy his video ads outperform his static display ads and click through by like a factor of 5, which is really unusual because most people don't click on video ads; they just watch them, right? So it just, but his message and his script is really compelling, so he gets a lot of click throughs on it versus the static banners that he runs. So it's you got to try and see what works because this. Our AI-driven marketing world is turning everything inside out and upside down. So you're never quite sure what's exactly going to work some days.
And that just made me think of a quick question. Has the interactive video hit the type of programmatic that's available at the lower budget, smaller businesses? You know what I mean? When you see the ad and it's got, use your remote and you pick the left or the right and you'll get typically it's not the ad changing and you're not directing the story, but some of the text on it will change. Is that available in
I haven't
business yet?
I haven't seen any of that being available in a lot of the ad slots that we're running, at least not at the price point we're running it at, right? So I think if I took the bids up, I'd probably see some more of that. But it's also, what are you trying to tell as a story? So
yeah, from what I've seen, it's a gimmick. So far, it's I think one of the big car insurance companies uses it, and I've played around with it and clicked on one time I'll see the ad, I'll click the left button, the other time I'll click the right button. It doesn't make any difference in the way the ad runs, but the text that comes up on the screen just doesn't seem like it's actually doing anything. I didn't know if that was even available, and if it was, does it give you any information, any feedback? Because if it did, then I guess if it factored in the cookie, you're not violating privacy laws, but otherwise you might run into issues there. Just interesting. Where are things going? Kind of.
And I think part of it too, Jeff, is thinking about the people who are serving the ads, right? So this stuff is happening in milliseconds, right? And so if it's a big piece of code that needs to get served as an ad at the back end of a whole bunch of decisions, they don't make the cut. They don't get served. So, I mean, I think about like the banner ads that used to come out that you could like play like a mini game in the ad, right? I remember some of those but those were people who were buying ads on specific sites or they were showing up in certain places. They were static ad placements as opposed to dynamic ads being served to an audience. So I think those are a little bit different.
And Jeff, maybe what those are doing is they're like the bots that call you and immediately hang up because they just want to register if you're an actual person that will answer the phone, and then they'll start spamming you.
I love those.
Yeah, I've been curious, like I said, A, is it available? And B, how is it used? But I think that's a glimpse of what's coming. It seems to be gimmicky so far, but I want to get your view on it.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff changes all the time. And my wish first and foremost is that they'd let me have altitude along with latitude and longitude, right? That would make things a lot easier.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, there's some really cool stuff that you can do with it that people are just not getting to any other way. So from that standpoint,
they're using the GPS in the phone, so conceivably they should. I mean, it's available, right?
Yeah, no, the data is served as part of it. It's just the ad exchanges that serve it aren't looking at it
targeting.
Right so that's a change on the supplier side that needs to get made.
Yeah, we'll get there.
And Dan, you mentioned that there's very minimal restrictions. I assume there's restrictions around geo-targeting, like military bases or secure facilities. Are there industry restrictions as well?
So you can't. Well, in the U.S., you can't target a elementary or middle school, high school.
Interesting. Yeah.
You cannot target a very defined medical facility. So like if it was a medical facility that only does chemotherapy, or only does dialysis, you can't really target those because they can get translated to personally identifiable information pretty quickly. So there's some restrictions like that are out there in terms of how you build an audience. On the advertising ad serving side, they're the same types of things that the TV stations, generally won't take, right? I mean, there's some of the stuff around, unsubstantiated claims around some of the medical stuff that's out there you can't do. There's some exchanges that won't take cannabis ads. So there's a few restrictions here and there. there's usually ways around some of them, but not all of them. So,
any other questions, guys? We're pretty much at the top of the hour, so I want to make sure we're mindful of time. But any last questions for Dan, the expert?
I'm good. Thanks for being here, Dan.
no, it's been a blast. I love talking about this stuff, as you guys can tell.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot of fun, and it becomes a really different way for people to get their brand and their message in front of their ideal customer, right? And that's ultimately with a small business what we're trying to do. So.
Thanks for breaking down the nuts and bolts of it, Dan. Really appreciate it. Thanks for bringing it down a level too. For some of us, that this is new to. If some of our listeners have never heard of this, I think they've gotten a really good 101 course, and maybe even a 201 course in programmatic advertising and how to target ideal clients better in a laser targeted way. How can people find you, reach out to you, find out more information about what you do?
Sure. Our website is shiftadvertising.io. And that's the easiest way. From there, my contact information is up there. You can grab me that way. I'm on LinkedIn as well. If you want to try and find me there, it's DF Kraus on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us. And to our listeners, if you like this episode, please let us know. Please, Ken is ready. Please smash the subscribe button. This is his favorite part of the whole show, Dan. Leave us reviews, and as always, keep investing in your marketing, and it will pay you back exponentially. So until next time, folks, keep calm and market on.